If you've ever looked at the cost of having windows installed in your house, you probably know that it is an insane number you get back. So if you're like me, you took matters into your own hands, went to Menards, and bought the cheapest window that money could buy that you could potentially fit in your current basement. What we're going to do today is look at this window that I've already installed, and we're going to look at different ways where we can trim out the interior of this window using nothing but cheap 1x6 pine from your local hardware store. Let's do it easy. Let's keep it simple. This is going to be totally fine for where it is in my garage. And if you're a beginner who doesn't want to do super detailed trim work, then this video is for you.
Hey, I'm Scott, and I love working with my hands and trying new things. Welcome to our little corner of YouTube, where our goal is to give you the knowledge and the confidence to tackle that next project all on your own. Let's fix some mistakes, learn some skills, and save thousands, all slightly above average, from your driveway to your doorway.
Now, you can see here we're at the bottom of our window, and in here is where we will put what's called our sill plate. So on this window, as you can see, I do store things in this corner, so I really don't want my sill to come out super far beyond, because I'd like to be able to put things mostly flush up against. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the depth from my window out to about where I want. So I'm going to go about 3 inches out here. And the next thing I want to measure is my length. I want my sill to extend beyond the window on each side. So for me, I want to go roughly 42 inches. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my table saw and my miter saw, and I'm going to cut it 3 inches and 42 inches on either side, and we'll touch back with you then. First cut I want to make here is on my miter saw for the total outside length of my sill at 42 inches. Next, I'm going to set up my table saw to rip my wood to be 3 inches. Now, it's really important on these table saws that you account for the width of the blade. So if I'm attempting to make a 3-inch cut, then I want to set it at 3 1/8 inches on my fence here to ensure that we're accounting for the width of the blade as it's coming through. So whatever your measurement is, measure your blade and add that distance to your cut on your fence. Okay, we're back in the garage and I have my sill plate cut right here. Next thing I want to do is I want to find the center line in both the inside of the window and also on the sill that I just cut. So I already have those marked here. My center line falls right here, 18 1/4, and then over here at 21 inches. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure out from the center line of my window in either direction, and I'm going to transfer that dimension from my center line onto my sill here. That's going to show me where I'm going to need to notch so that it'll slide nicely into the window. Okay, now that I found the center line of my window opening and my new window sill, and then I marked the width of the window opening on my board here, the next measurement I'm going to take is the corners of the window out to the edge of the opening. So from my window here to the edge here is 1 1/4 inches. I'm just going to double check that it's the same on this side. Yep, 1 1/4 inches from my window to the outside edge of the spacer. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take that 1 1/4 inches and I'm going to transfer that measurement to the outside edges of my new sill, and that's going to show me where I need to notch so that it'll slide right into the windowsill. Okay, I've got you guys over here on the workbench now. What we're going to do is take that 1 3/4 inches that we measured from the window to the edge of the window frame, and I've got it marked on here, 1 3/4 inches, and same down here on the other end at 1 3/4 inches. Save yourself some time, pick yourself up a speed square. You've got this little notch right here, helps you to create perfectly straight lines. Grab that ledge, stick it on the flat end of your board, just like that, trace it on, done. Rinse and repeat over here, and done. Next, we're going to take this to the saw, and we're going to cut out this notch so we can slide our new sill plate perfectly into our window frame. All right, my weapon of choice for this cut is going to be our jigsaw, just because we have a pretty hard 90 to make in here. That could be tricky with a miter saw or a circular saw. Again, guys, use what you've got. If you have a circular saw, a miter saw, maybe a multi-tool, whatever you can do. Honestly, guys, yes, it's okay to use cheap tools. I've had this Black & Decker forever. I bought it at a yard sale for like $4, and it's been great. You don't always need the fanciest and the best. Let's hop in and get it done. So because this window is smaller than the window that was there, I did have to add a 2x4 on each side to add a cumulative total of 3 inches on each side so that the smaller window would fit in. And what that means is that you'll see here, the drywall no longer comes out far enough to cover the spacing of the window frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this. And since it's 2x4, it's about 1.5 inches. So we're going to go about 1.25 inches. And what I'm going to have to do is cut 1.25 inch strips of drywall and just sort of fill in the gaps around the window. Check back with you when that's done. Okay, so over here on the workbench, I'm working with what's left of a half sheet of drywall, which is not exactly ideal for this, but it's what I have. And in the interest of saving money, it's what I'm going to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure that 1.5 inches up from the bottom. And actually, I'm going to go about 1.25 inches just to leave a little bit of a reveal. And ultimately, I have this drywall T-square, which is awesome. You only have to make a mark on one side, slide it down, slide it across. If you don't have this drywall T-square, that's okay. Just make your mark on both sides. Same thing, 1.25 inches up here. And then you can use any straight edge. Just connect the dots. That's about all there is to it. So I'm going to come in here, mark my 1.25 inches. That's about that. Next thing, just grab your utility knife, cut along that line that you just marked. Best you can. Okay. Once that's done, drag it over the edge, give it a pop, and that'll break right on that line you took. Come in with your utility knife, and just cut that back paper, and then you've got a strip ready to go up. Okay, back over at the window here, I've got my drywall strip that I just cut put in place. We're going to take a couple 1-inch drywall screws and my impact, put about 3 in here. And you want to be really careful not to sink them in too far. You want to go just below the surface, because what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll fill that with drywall mud. So make sure you're countersinking those screws about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, now that I've got that one strip in, I'm going to cut the rest, get these put in, and I'll touch back with you then. Hey guys, we're back at the window here. And as you can see, I've completed framing out the opening and filling in the spaces with strips of drywall. Now, like I said, a full sheet would be ideal because you wouldn't have to cut shorter lengths and end up with all these unsightly seams, but we're all about saving money, and what I had was a half sheet. But like I said, never claimed to be a professional. So now that this window is spaced out, what you really would do typically would be to fill your nail holes and then tape it with drywall mud. However, all of this is going to get covered up anyways since we're putting trim over it, so we're not going to bother. All about saving time. Next thing we're going to do is grab that sill that I cut in the last few clips. I'm going to show you how that fits in. Now, before I put my sill plate in, I want to make sure that I'm insulating the gaps that I've created on the sides of the windows. Since the window is a little bit smaller than the existing one, I have about a 3/4 to a 1-inch gap all around the outside of the window. A lot of people would use spray foam here. I happen to have some R13 fiberglass batting insulation. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut a few of those strips up and tuck them in around the window, and then we'll check back in with you. All right, back over here at the window now. I've managed to stick our R13 insulation in all the way around the window. It's a tight fit, but get a little pry bar, push it in. Paper side faces towards the inside of the house. Also, I got my sill plate here that I created ready to go in. All I'm going to do is set that right on top of that bottom plate there. And I'm going to take my nail gun. This is a Metabo. It's just the cheap 15-gauge nailer from Menards. It's actually a really, really nice gun for those of you who are just starting out if you don't have a big budget like me. And all you're going to do is take it, pop a couple nails into the sill plate, and you're set. Easy as that. I should note, I'm going a little bit out of order with my jambs. I started with the sill plate because those are the materials I had on hand without running to the hardware store. Now that I'm back though, typically what we would do is you would start with your header jamb, and then you would do your side jambs, and then you would do your bottom or sill plate last. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to jump on to my top here. I'm going to get a measure from the length. So that's about 36 and 5/8 by 2 1/8. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to fill this gap from the window all the way out to the face of our drywall here. I'm going to write those measurements down, go make some cuts. All right, guys, I'm back from the saw. I grabbed this piece and my initial measurements, it was sitting a little bit proud of the drywall. So I had to go back twice and I took an 1/8 off each time. And that's okay. Your measurements may not be perfect first go. Just test fit until you have it where you want it. But right now it's sitting just nice and flush with that drywall. And we're overlapping the window just a little bit, about 1/8 of an inch, which is perfect for what I want to do today. So same thing. I'm going to stick this up in here. I'm going to grab my nailer. Pop a few in. And that's it for your top plate. All right, if you guessed that our next step is to measure our side jambs, you guessed correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done. 52 3/4 by about 2 1/8 inch depth. I'm going to cut both sides. I'll see you back here to put them in. All right, so I've got our side jambs cut. One important thing to mention is before you put any of these jambs in, you really should be sanding them if you're going to use this pine like I am. It just helps, gets out the imperfections, makes it really nice to feel, and it'll take paint or stain better later on if that's what you decide to do. So I've got them seated in here very nicely. Take a little rubber mallet, help it tap it in that way. Make sure you seat it nice and well against the inside of the window frame. And then stick it in. And that's all there is to it. All right, so now that we have our side jambs and our top jam in, it's time to start casing out our window. Now, casing is what's going to actually encompass the perimeter of the window, and it's going to be the final step, so to speak, in what we're doing here. For my casing, I'm just using 1x4 pine, cheap stuff from the hardware store. You could do something nicer. You could get like a colonial style casing if this weren't in your garage. Yeah, so here's the thing, guys. I'm cheap. And this is cheap, and I have it laying around. So that's what we're going to use. What we're going to do to get our measurements is we're going to start on the sides first, okay? So the left and the right side are what are going to get our casing initially. And in order to get that measurement, you're going to start with your tape all the way down here on the sill. And then you're going to come right up to here where that side jam meets the top jam. And then you're going to go about another 3/8 of an inch. You're going to want to count for what's called a reveal. Your trim is not going to come all the way down flush with this. You're going to want to leave a little bit of a gap. So we're going to account for that in this measurement here. So from the sill to about 3/8 of an inch up, I'm looking at about 53 1/8. So 53 1/8 is my number. I'm going to write that down on my handy dandy drywall notepad. Hard to find, limited release. And the other thing we're going to know, guys, is that this is going to be the low side of our 45-degree cut. So if you picture the way a 45-degree angle works and the way you angle your saw, we're going to want the 53 1/4 to be on the low side of that 45-degree cut. Let's head over to the saw and make it happen. All right, I've got you guys set up on the saw here. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to make this 45-degree angle for our casing. So if you're looking at the board here, we're going to imagine that down here is your windowsill. So that's going to stay flat. But then when we picture it, we want the high side of our 45 to be on the inside of the board, since it's going to angle itself like this. So that magic number that we found earlier was 53 1/8, which I've marked right here. So in order to put that 53 1/8 on the low side of our 45, I'm going to spin my saw this way to the 45-degree mark, slide it, and then when I'm making my cut, I want to just clip the edge of that mark that I made in my saw, and that should give us a perfect 45-degree angle. Awesome, looks good. Let's go set this up against the wall, and then we'll look at how to measure the right side. All right, so I've got my left side cut here. I'm just going to put that to the side for now. Let's take a look at the right side, and it's going to be the exact same process as the left. We're just going to flip our 45-degree angle. So from the sill up, we're going to measure to the top jamb, and then we're going to add another 3/8 to that for our reveal. So this is looking like about the same measurement as the last one. We're going to go 53 1/8 on the low side. The important thing to remember is that we're going to have to flip our saw the other way so that we get the opposite 45-degree angle. Let's get it done. All right, back out here at the saw again. Now, the saw is still in the orientation it was from our last cut. Since we're doing the opposite side, we need to go to the opposite 45. Now, I already measured out my 53 1/8 inch that I need for this cut. And the important thing to remember is that we measured to the low side of that cut. So the low side in this case is going to be on the inside, since our 45 is going to go this way. So all we want to do, same as last time, we want to line it up. We want to just nick the edge of that mark that I made, and that'll give us a perfect 45. Perfect. Let's take this inside. All right, now that we have our casing cut for the left side and the right side, I like to throw them up, just put one nail in them to hold them, and that allows me to get a little bit more accurate measurement for our top piece of casing. So what you want to do before you put these up is you want to mark about 3/8 of an inch from the inside out, and what that's going to do is it's going to give you about a 3/8 inch gap of what's called a reveal. And that reveal is there so that we can run a thin bead of caulk in there. It just looks clean, it looks really nice, and as perfect as I am, my measurements aren't always great. So that caulk's going to help us to have a really nice finish on there. So coming down here, I'm just going to mark 3/8. Coming up top, I'm going to mark 3/8. Same over here, and same down here. So all I did was I just marked the lines where I am going to throw this casing up, line it up on the bottom, line it up on the top. I'm going to grab my nail gun, and I'm just going to put one nail in to hold it for now. Now, the reason I'm only putting one nail in is because I want to be able to adjust this pretty easily, kind of pivot it back and forth to help get that top piece in as tight as possible. All right, lined up, nail it. All right, now that my sides are in, what I'm going to do is take my measuring tape, and I am going to measure our top piece. So I'm going to take the measurement from our low side. So our low side is 35 3/4. So when I head out to the saw, I know that the inside of my 45s is going to be 35 3/4. Let's get it done. All right, folks, back from the saw. Got my 45s on each end. Let's go ahead and set it up, see how we do on the top here. Now, earlier, when I put these side pieces up, I only put one nail in them so that they'll pivot and allow us just a little bit of adjustment to get this all seated in here as nicely as possible. Now, believe it or not, this window is not perfectly framed, and so the likelihood of it being a perfect 45 is pretty slim. Usually you can get close enough with 45s, and if you get little pinholes, tiny little gaps, you can go back later with a little wood filler, fill it in, sand it out, and you'll never be able to tell. All right, this looks good enough for my standards, so I'm going to go ahead and tack this thing in. All right, the last part of the casing of our window here is going to be to put in what's called an apron underneath our sill plate here. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this sill plate is a little bit funky. I made it really, really small because I'm going to be storing items in here and I don't want it protruding very far out. And I have limited space to the sides because of my cabinets here. So this is going to be a really, really small apron, but it just puts a nice little cap on it and finishes it off. So I'm going to measure the length of this roughly. I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap, probably about a 1/2 inch gap on each side. So I'm looking at 41 inches in length. And this one I'm going to have to shave down a little bit and have to rip it on the table saw just because my sill is so short. So we're looking at about a 1/2 inch there. So we're going to do 41 by about a 1/2 inch. And I think we'll do probably about 2.5 inches down just to sort of cover all this ugliness there. I'm going to go. All Alrighty, I'm back with my apron. I went ahead and I took a little bit extra off just to kind of seat it up a little bit higher underneath the sash. I originally said I was going to do about 2.5 inches. I decided on like 1 3/4. I think that looks better. So what I did, if you can see here, I found the center line of my sill and I found the center line of my apron. And all I'm going to do is line those up. That gives me about a 1/2 inch gap on each side. And I'm just going to go ahead and nail that in. Helps if you have nails in the gun. All right, we're back. Good reminder, I've been using 1 3/4 15 gauge nails. If you happen to get this particular Metabo, they're 34-degree angle nails. Well, let's get this thing put in. That's all she wrote. Hey guys, so you might realize that my window looks a little bit different than it did the last clip you saw it. So last night I turned the camera off, I stood back, and I realized I didn't really like how thick I had my casing. So I did just pull the casing back off real easy, and I took about 1 inch off the outside of each piece of casing, put it back on. A little bit thinner, a little bit sleeker, looks a little bit less chonky now, and it fits on the sill a little bit nicer as well. So hey, never claimed to be a professional. I'm kind of learning as I go too here. So the fact of the matter is, guys, is that this is done as far as putting in our jams and our casing goes. Our next step here is going to be to caulk the seams, fill the nail holes, and I think I'm going to stain this one. So we'll look at staining it and polyurethaning it as well. If that's something you're interested in, hit that subscribe button, follow along for more. You know, this process is pretty similar on the exterior as well, at least for me. I have a brick house. If you have vinyl siding, it's going to look a little bit different. The only difference is going to be that you're not going to want to use a pine on the exterior. You're going to want to look at like an LP or like a red cedar for your trim instead, which will be a little bit more expensive, but it's going to withstand the test of time. So that's all for today, folks. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, if I can do it, you can definitely do it. Now, if this video helped you, or you just want to follow along and learn any other number of automotive or household tasks along with me, hit that subscribe button. Find more content like this. Thanks for watching, guys.